It was the kind of night that killed the unprepared, a blizzard raging with the fury of something ancient and merciless, turning the world into a white void where even desperate prayers froze before they left your lips. But then came a voice, raw, breaking, impossibly young. On the gilded steps of the fortress mansion stood a girl, skeletal and shaking, clutching two trembling tabby kittens to her chest, like they were the last pieces of her soul. She had no idea that the man who answered the door would become both her salvation and her nightmare, or that the word he spoke next would shatter her, and awaken a past soaked in blood, betrayal, and a sister she thought was dead. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story grips your heart, please subscribe for more. The blizzard tore across the isolated Wyoming Valley like a living weapon, battering the stone walls of the Gardner mansion with fists of ice and wind. Snow fell in suffocating curtains, erasing roads, swallowing sound, and burying hope beneath layers of merciless white. The mansion itself stood defiant against the storm, 3 stories of dark stone and tinted windows surrounded by 12-foot walls topped with security cameras that never blinked. Golden light spilled from the arched entrance, a cruel taunt to anyone foolish enough to be caught outside on a night like this. Before we dive in, I pray that everyone who watches this video, subscribes, and leaves a comment will receive the very thing their heart has been searching for. Whether it's peace, clarity, healing, or a breakthrough they've been waiting on. May unexpected blessings find you. May your silent prayers be answered, and may goodness follow you wherever you go. Now let's begin. Inside, Dominic Gardner stood in his private study, surrounded by mahogany darkness and the cold blue glow of security monitors. At 34, he was a man built from controlled violence and deliberate silence. The kind of man who made empires kneel with a single phone call. His athletic frame moved with predatory grace beneath tailored black clothing that couldn't quite hide the intricate tattoos crawling up his neck and forearms, a coded history written in ink and regret. Each symbol told a story, a life taken, a debt repaid, a promise carved into flesh so he would never forget. Steel gray eyes swept across the camera feeds with the vigilance of someone who had learned, through blood and loss, that mercy was a crack in armor and trust a fatal disease. 24 screens showed 24 angles of his fortress. The perimeter was secure. The guards were at their posts. The night, despite its fury, was under control. He had not intended to answer the security alert himself. His staff existed precisely to filter out the world's noise, but something about the thermal signature on screen 7 made him pause. A small form, erratic movement. Too weak to be a threat, too desperate to ignore. Then it came. Not the electronic chime of the intercom, but the actual, physical pounding of frozen fists against reinforced oak, a sound that shouldn't have been possible through the mansion's layered security. 3 strikes, 4, each one weaker than the last, carrying the kind of desperation that belonged to someone who had already accepted death, but was making one final futile attempt to bargain with it. Dominic's jaw tightened, his hand instinctively moving toward the concealed holster beneath his jacket, a Sig Sauer P226 that had ended more conversations than it had started. His father had taught him the first law of their world: never open the door to strangers, never show weakness, never let sentiment cloud judgment. His father had died with 3 bullets in his chest for breaking that very rule. His younger sister had vanished for the same reason, a moment of misplaced trust during a supposed peace negotiation that had torn a hole through his life 8 years ago, leaving him with nothing but faded photographs and an empire built on the promise that he would never be vulnerable again. Luna had been 14, bright, reckless in the way only the truly innocent could be. She'd believed people could change, that enemies could become allies. The syndicate had taught her otherwise, and then they'd made her disappear. The compound had become his fortress. 24 guards, biometric locks, surveillance that could track a heartbeat through concrete. Yet here he stood, his hand on the door handle, drawn forward by something he didn't want to name, that tight, crawling sensation at the base of his skull that whispered danger and destiny in the same breath. He had learned that instinct was never wrong. The mansion held its breath around him, waiting. The monitors flickered. The thermal signature on the steps grew fainter, collapsing inward. Dominic Gardner, the architect. The man who had built an empire from calculated ruthlessness and emotional emptiness, disengaged 3 locks and opened the door. The girl who stood on his threshold was barely more than a shadow given form. 16 years condensed into a frame so skeletal that the oversized coat hanging from her shoulders looked like it was devouring her alive. Mud caked her clothes in frozen layers. Her face, framed by matted dark hair the color of burnt umber, was a geography of suffering. Hollow cheeks, cracked lips bleeding at the corners, and eyes, pale green, almost translucent in the golden light, that held the particular kind of exhaustion that came not from one bad night, but from hundreds of them strung together into a life. But it was what she held against her chest that stopped Dominic cold. 2 tabby kittens, no more than a few weeks old, trembled in her arms. Their striped fur was matted and damp, their tiny bodies shaking so violently they seemed to vibrate. The girl's hands, raw, red, barely functional from the cold, curled protectively around them as if they were made of something more precious than gold or oxygen or time. For 3 seconds Dominic couldn't breathe. The pattern of stripes, the exact shade of orange and cream, the way one of them had a distinctive M-shaped marking on its forehead, dark against light fur. Just like Luna's cat. Just like Marmalade. His sister's rescue. The one she'd found mewling in a storm drain when she was 12. The one she'd nursed back to health with a determination that bordered on obsession. The one she'd been holding the night the black sedans rolled up to their mother's house, the night the negotiations went wrong. The night Luna walked out into the rain and never came back. The memory hit him like a bullet, sudden, sharp, burrowing deep. "Can we?" The girl's voice cracked, barely more than a whisper forced through a throat that had forgotten how to form words. She swayed on her feet, hypothermia stealing her balance. "Can we sleep in your garage, sir?" The question hung in the frozen air between them, fragile and desperate. Dominic's face remained granite, emotionless. The mask he'd perfected over years of negotiations, executions, and calculated cruelty. His mind processed the variables with mechanical efficiency: unknown entity, possible surveillance plant, weakness if admitted, liability if rejected and found dead on property, security breach regardless of decision. Behind him, he heard the soft footsteps of Marcus, his head of night security, approaching with weapon drawn. The girl's eyes, those pale green eyes that reminded him of sea glass worn smooth by violence, met his. She didn't beg, didn't plead. She simply stood there, shaking, waiting for the inevitable rejection that her short life had already taught her was coming. One of the kittens mewed, a thin, pitiful sound that cut through the howling wind. Dominic's chest tightened, Luna crying in her room after their father died. Luna curled around Marmalade, the only thing that made her feel safe. Luna's voice, bright and certain. "Nick, we can't just leave things to die. We have to at least try." "No." The word came out flat, final. A door slamming shut. The girl's face didn't change. She'd expected nothing else. But something in her shoulders collapsed inward, a last support beam giving way. She nodded once. A tiny movement that said thank you for not shooting me, and turned back toward the blizzard that would kill her within the hour. She took 1 step. 2. The kitten mewed again. "We have to at least try, Nick." "Wait." The word left his mouth before his brain authorized it, bypassing every protocol, every lesson, every scar that had taught him better. The girl stopped but didn't turn around, as if she couldn't bear to watch hope die twice. Dominic's hand tightened on the doorframe. Marcus appeared at his shoulder, weapon raised, eyes asking the silent question. "Sir? You can stay in the servants' annex." His voice was cold, drained of anything resembling compassion. Each word was a transaction, not a gift. "But understand this. You work. You follow every rule. You speak to no one about what you see here. You breathe wrong. You look at something you shouldn't, you become a problem in any capacity. He paused, letting the weight of the unspoken threat settle into the space between them. And I will not simply throw you back into the snow. I will make you wish I had. Do you understand? The girl turned slowly, her pale eyes wide with shock, and something that might have been the ghost of hope trying to resurrect itself from a grave it had dug too many times before. I understand, sir. Marcus. Dominic stepped back from the threshold, his face carved from ice. Take her to Annex Room 3. Get her cleaned up. The animals stay with her, but she's responsible for them. Any damage, any noise, any problems, she answers for it. Full monitoring, no exceptions. Yes, sir. As Marcus moved forward to escort the girl inside, Dominic caught one last glimpse of her face, exhausted, terrified, and carrying something in her expression that he recognized because he'd worn it himself once, a lifetime ago. The look of someone who had just made a deal with the devil and knew it. He closed the door and returned to his study, the monitors casting their blue glow across his face. On screen 7, he watched Marcus guide the girl across the courtyard toward the annex, her form barely visible through the snow. Dominic poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and didn't drink it. His hand, he realized, was shaking. Stupid, he told the empty room. Sentimental, weak. But he didn't reverse the order. Somewhere in the locked drawer of his desk, beneath classified files and encrypted drives, there was a photograph. A 14-year-old girl with dark hair and a bright smile, holding a tabby kitten with an M-shaped marking on its forehead. He didn't open the drawer. He didn't need to. The girl in the photograph was already haunting him. She had been for 8 years. Ella woke to warmth for the first time in months, and it felt like a betrayal. The bed beneath her was too soft, the blankets too clean, the silence too complete. She bolted upright, panic clawing through her chest until she felt the small bodies curled against her ribs. Shadow and ghost, still breathing, still alive. The room was small but immaculate. White walls, recessed lighting with no visible switch. A single window of reinforced glass showed nothing but snow-covered courtyard and the main house looming beyond like a dark cathedral. In the corner, a camera with a blinking red light watched her with mechanical patience. She'd counted 3 more during the night, one above the door, one in the bathroom, one hidden in the smoke detector that wasn't quite aligned with the ceiling. The annex itself was a contradiction, luxurious by any standard she'd known, yet unmistakably a cage. The door required a keycard she didn't have. The windows didn't open. Every surface gleamed with the kind of sterile perfection that said someone was always watching, always waiting for the smallest violation. Marcus had given her the rules before locking her in. Wake at 6, shower. Dress in the provided uniform, gray shirt, black pants, both 2 sizes too large. Report to the service entrance. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not enter rooms without permission. Do not touch anything that isn't part of your assigned tasks. The cameras see everything. The architect forgets nothing. She'd nodded through it all, her body still shaking from cold that had burrowed into her bones, and promised herself she would remember every word, every lock, every guard rotation. Because this wasn't salvation, this was reconnaissance. The work was brutal in its mundanity. She scrubbed floors already spotless, polished silverware that gleamed like surgical instruments. Prepared vegetables in an industrial kitchen where 3 other silent staff members moved with choreographed efficiency, never making eye contact, never asking questions. A woman named Teresa showed her the tasks with hand gestures and disapproving glances at her trembling fingers. The message was clear: perform or disappear. Shadow and Ghost stayed in her room during the day, fed on expensive kitten formula Marcus delivered without comment. At night, when she returned exhausted and hollow, they were the only things that felt real. She'd named them in the darkness. Shadow for the brother who'd died when she was 10, Ghost for the sister who'd vanished the night their parents were murdered. The names were grief given form, whispered reminders of everyone she'd lost. From the service corridors, she watched Dominic move through his empire. He kept a rigid schedule: meetings in the West Library at 8, phone calls in his study at noon, training in the compound gym at 6. Men in expensive suits came and went, their faces hard and their briefcases handcuffed to their wrists. She learned to recognize the hierarchy. The ones who knocked waited. The ones who entered freely feared him, and the ones he smiled at were already dead. But there were cracks in the armor. Hairline fractures she collected like evidence. The way he paused outside the kitchen when Teresa's daughter called about her school play, listening 3 seconds longer than necessary. The distant look when he stood alone in the library, staring at a photograph she couldn't see. The gentle way he corrected a young guard who'd forgotten protocol. His voice firm, but lacking the edge it carried with everyone else. These moments confused her. Monsters weren't supposed to have soft edges. On the 4th night, Marcus's voice crackled through the door intercom. "The architect wants to see you. Study. Now." Her heart stopped. She followed Marcus through corridors she hadn't been cleared to enter, deeper into the main house where luxury revealed itself, marble floors, oil paintings in gilded frames, the kind of wealth that came from blood and silence. Dominic stood behind his desk when she entered, backlit by the fireplace, his face unreadable. "The cats, they're killing the compound mice." Ella's throat closed. This was it, the violation. "I'm sorry, sir, I'll—" "Good," he cut her off. "Keep them. Teresa's been complaining about the traps for months." He paused, and something almost human flickered across his expression before dying. "Your sister. The one you lost. What was her name?" The question landed like a punch. "Sir?" "You talk in your sleep. The annex monitors record audio." His steel-gray eyes pinned her in place. "I'm asking what her name was." Her voice came out broken. "Elias. Her name was Elias." Something in Dominic's face shifted, a shadow passing behind his eyes, there and gone so fast she might have imagined it. "Dismissed." She fled. But as she reached the corridor, she heard his voice again, so quiet it was almost swallowed by the crackling fire. "I had a sister too." The words followed her back to the annex, burrowing under her skin where the cameras couldn't see. The basement vault wasn't supposed to exist. At least, not according to the compound blueprints Ella had memorized from the framed architectural rendering in the east hallway. But on the 8th day, Teresa handed her a keycard with a red stripe and a bucket of industrial cleaning supplies, gesturing toward a steel door at the end of the service corridor that Ella had assumed was mechanical storage. "Once a month," Teresa said, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 hours. Touch nothing but dust. The security protocols were suffocating. Biometric scanner, keycard. 8-digit code that Teresa made her repeat twice. Weight-sensitive floor plates that would trigger lockdown if she stepped wrong. And cameras. So many cameras that the red lights created a constellation across the ceiling, blinking in synchronized rhythm like electronic heartbeats. The vault itself was a cathedral of secrets. Filing cabinets lined the walls, each one labeled with years spanning 3 decades. Bankers' boxes stacked on industrial shelves. A workstation with 3 monitors, all dark, all waiting. The air smelled of paper and metal and something else. Old violence, maybe? Or just the accumulated weight of information people had died to protect. Ella's hands shook as she dusted the first cabinet. Her parents had been killed 8 years ago. If Dominic had been involved, if the architect had signed off on it, there would be records. There had to be. Men like him didn't operate on impulse. They documented, they archived, they kept receipts for murder. She worked methodically, establishing a pattern the cameras would recognize as routine, dust the cabinet tops, wipe down the handles, move to the next row. But her eyes were cataloging everything, the label system, the lock mechanisms, the blind spot near the corner where 3 filing cabinets created a small alcove the cameras couldn't quite reach. 2 hours in, she found it. A cabinet labeled 2017-2018, External Operations, the year her parents died, the year Elias disappeared, the year her world ended in blood and unanswered questions. The cabinet was locked, but the mechanism was old, pre-digital, pre-biometric. Just a simple, keyed lock that Teresa's cleaning cart had 3 universal options for. Ella's heart hammered against her ribs as she glanced at the camera timer. 73 seconds until the next rotation to the far side of the vault. She'd counted them obsessively. She slid into the alcove, hands moving with the desperate efficiency of someone who knew this was her only chance. The second key worked. The drawer opened with a whisper of metal on metal. Files. So many files. She flipped through them with trembling fingers, searching for Tony, or Syndicate, or Elias, or anything that would. There. A manila folder. No label. Just a red stamp that said disposed across the front. Inside, surveillance photos. A small house. A family. Her family. Her mother's face. Her father's laugh lines. And a handwritten note clipped to the top. Informant family neutralized per syndicate protocol. Witnesses eliminated. Operation successful. At the bottom, a signature in black ink. The architect. Ella couldn't breathe. The proof. The final damning proof that the man who'd saved her was the man who'd destroyed her. You're in the wrong section. The voice came from behind her, cold and sharp as a blade. Ella spun, the file slipping from her hands. A woman stood at the edge of the alcove, tall, athletic build, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore tactical gear and carried herself with the kind of lethal grace that said she'd killed before, and would again without hesitation. A guard. High-ranking. Someone Ella had never seen before. I was just... Ella stammered, her mind screaming for a plausible excuse. The cabinet was open. I was closing it. The woman's eyes dropped to the scattered papers on the floor, to the file with the red stamp, to Ella's face, now drained of color. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then the woman smiled, an expression that held no warmth, only recognition. You're the stray, the one with the cats. She stepped closer, and Ella saw the weapon holstered at her hip, the radio clipped to her shoulder. Does the architect know you're reading his private files? No, please, I wasn't. Lying makes it worse. The woman pulled the radio from her belt, thumb hovering over the call button. Ella's world collapsed into a single, desperate choice: run and confirm her guilt, or stay and pray for mercy she didn't deserve. I'll put it back, Ella whispered. I'll forget I saw it. Please. The woman studied her with the detached curiosity of someone examining an insect. Then, impossibly, she lowered the radio. Clean up this mess, return to your quarters, and understand something. She leaned in close enough that Ella could smell gunpowder and expensive perfume. The only reason you're still breathing is because I'm curious what you'll do next. She walked away, her footsteps echoing off concrete. Ella's hands shook so violently she could barely gather the papers. She shoved them back into the file, locked the cabinet, and finished her cleaning in a blind panic, the woman's words circling through her mind like vultures. That night, Dominic summoned her again. He didn't sit, didn't offer her a chair, just stood by the window of his study, silhouette dark against the snow-lit glass. You moved 3 filing cabinets today, he said quietly, 6 inches to the left, to reach the 2017 archives. Ella's blood turned to ice. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought the cameras had a blind spot. He turned, and his steel-gray eyes held something worse than anger, disappointment. I see everything, Ella. Every breath, every choice, every lie. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Whatever you're looking for down there, it will get you killed. Not by me, by the truth. His voice dropped to something almost gentle, which made it more terrifying. Stop searching, or I can't protect you from what you'll find. He dismissed her with a gesture, but as she reached the door, his voice caught her one last time. The woman you met today. Her name is Elias, and she's the reason you're still alive. Ella returned to the vault 3 days later with different eyes. The woman who'd caught her, the one Dominic called Elias, the one who wore her sister's name like stolen skin, hadn't reported her. That single act of mercy was more terrifying than any threat because it meant she was being watched for a reason, studied. assessed for some purpose Ella couldn't yet see. But if they thought she would stop searching, they'd miscalculated. Teresa had given her the vault assignment again, this time with a longer window, 4 hours to clean the entire lower level. The older woman's hands had trembled as she passed over the keycard, and Ella wondered how many cleaners had gone into that vault and never come back out. She worked faster this time, her movements practiced and efficient. Dust the surfaces. Establish the pattern, wait for the camera rotation, but now she was searching for something specific, the loose panel she'd noticed during her last visit, hidden behind the 2015-2017 filing cabinets where the wall met the floor at an angle that didn't quite match the architectural lines. 40 minutes in, she found it. A section of baseboard that shifted when pressed, revealing a narrow gap behind the drywall. Her fingers scraped against metal. A fireproof box, small enough to hide, but heavy with the weight of things worth protecting. The box wasn't locked. It didn't need to be. Anyone who made it this far had already breached a dozen other security measures. Inside, a collection of archived files bound with red string, each one marked with a year and a single word: terminated. Her hands moved through them with mechanical precision, searching for 2017, for Tony, for the truth she'd been chasing since the night she'd woken up in a foster home, covered in her mother's blood, with no memory of how she'd survived when everyone else had died. She found it at the bottom. The folder was thin, barely a dozen pages, as if her family's entire existence could be reduced to a bureaucratic summary. Surveillance photos paper-clipped to the first page showed her house, the one with the yellow door and the garden her mother had loved, her father's car in the driveway, her mother hanging laundry. Images of a life that had been watched, catalogued, and marked for death. The report was clinical in its brutality. Tony family, informant liability. Father, Marcus Tony, 41, witnessed syndicate meeting 08-14-2017. Mother, Sarah Tony, 39, confirmed knowledge of operation details. 2 children, Elias, 14, and Ella, 8. Recommendation: full disposal to prevent information leak. Authorization required. At the bottom of the page, in black ink that had bled slightly into the paper, a single signature: the architect. Below it, a stamped approval. Operation executed 08-22-2017. The date her world ended. Ella's vision blurred. The vault's fluorescent lights became too bright, the air too thin. She was living in the house of her parents' murderer, sleeping under his roof, eating his food. She'd thanked him. She'd looked at him with something dangerously close to gratitude when he'd shown mercy to a stray who'd knocked on his door. The cruelty of it was almost beautiful in its completeness. She forced herself to keep reading. The second page detailed the operation logistics, the team assigned, the cleanup crew. The cover story fed to local authorities: carbon monoxide leak, tragic accident, no survivors. But that was a lie. There had been survivors. Ella had survived, found by a neighbor who'd heard screaming. And Elias, her sister, had been there, had been on the list, had been marked for disposal, just like the rest of them. So why was she alive? Why was she here, wearing tactical gear and Dominic's truss-like armor? The third page answered the question she hadn't known to ask. Note: primary target M. Tony eliminated. Secondary targets S. Tony, E. Tony, age 8, eliminated. Tertiary target Eco Tony, age 14, extracted per architect's direct order. Asset recruitment in progress. Extracted. Not saved. Recruited. Dominic hadn't murdered her sister. He'd made her into something worse. A weapon, a tool, a shell programmed to serve the man who'd killed her family. And Ella was next. The realization hit her with physical force. The mercy at the door, the room in the annex, the careful observation. He was doing it again, extracting the useful parts, discarding the trauma, building a new soldier from the ruins of a murdered family. Her hands moved on instinct, pulling the small phone she'd stolen from the kitchen storage, an old burner with a cracked screen that no one had missed yet. She photographed every page, the camera's artificial shutter sound impossibly loud in the vault's silence. Evidence. Proof. The kind of documentation that could bring down an empire if it reached the right people. She returned everything to its hiding place, restored the panel, and finished her cleaning with hands that no longer shook. The fear had burned away, leaving something colder and sharper in its place. Purpose. For the next week, she became a different kind of servant. She still cleaned, still followed orders, still maintained the mask of broken gratitude. But now she was mapping every camera's blind spot, every guard's rotation, every exit route, every moment when Dominic was alone, unprotected, vulnerable. She sketched the compound's layout on paper she burned afterward, memorizing each detail until the fortress existed as a blueprint in her mind. She timed the security shifts down to the second. She noted which guards were loyal out of fear and which out of genuine respect. The first would hesitate, the second wouldn't. At night, with shadow and ghost curled against her ribs, she planned. Not escape. Escape was surrender. She planned exposure, justice. A reckoning that would drag the architect's empire into the light and burn it down with the same ruthless efficiency he'd used to murder her family. But first, she needed to understand what had happened to her sister. Why Elias had let her live. Whether the girl who'd once braided Ella's hair and promised to always protect her still existed somewhere beneath the weapon Dominic had created. She needed to know if her sister could be saved, or if she'd have to destroy her too. Elias was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost that moved through the compound with the kind of presence that made even hardened guards straighten their postures. Ella saw her in fragments at first, a silhouette crossing the courtyard at dawn, a voice giving clipped orders through closed doors, the sound of footsteps that somehow carried authority in their rhythm. The woman who'd caught her in the vault, who wore her sister's name like a stolen identity, seemed to exist in a state of perpetual motion and perfect control. She was beautiful in the way weapons were beautiful, all clean lines and deadly efficiency. Dark hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, eyes the color of winter ice that seemed to calculate threat assessment with every glance. She moved like water, like violence held in suspension, and when she spoke, people listened with the kind of attention reserved for imminent danger. Ella watched her obsessively, unable to look away. There was something in the way Elias tilted her head when concentrating, something in the precise angle of her shoulders, that pulled at memories Ella couldn't quite reach. Phantom sensations. A hand braiding her hair, a voice reading bedtime stories, the smell of vanilla and safety, rose up and died before she could name them. It was the third week when Ella finally heard her laugh, brief, controlled, in response to something Dominic said as they walked past the service corridor. The sound hit Ella like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs. She knew that laugh. She'd heard it 1,000 times in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Her hands started shaking so badly she dropped the cleaning supplies, the clatter echoing through the hallway. Elias's head snapped toward the noise, those ice-cold eyes locking onto Ella with predatory focus. For 3 seconds they stared at each other. Ella saw no recognition in that gaze, no flicker of the sister who'd once promised to always protect her. Just assessment. Calculation. The look of someone deciding whether to eliminate a problem. Then Elias turned away, continuing her conversation with Dominic as if Ella were nothing more than furniture. That night, desperation made Ella reckless. She'd memorized Dominic's schedule down to the minute. He trained in the compound gym from 6 to 7 every evening, a routine he never broke. The study would be empty. The laptop would be there, password protected, but possibly vulnerable if she moved fast enough. She waited until 6:05, then slipped through the service entrance using the keycard she'd cloned from Teresa's set. The study was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Mahogany desk, leather chair, the fireplace cold and dark. The laptop sat closed, its silver surface reflecting the last rays of sunset through the window. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The login screen appeared, demanding a password and biometric scan. But Ella had watched Dominic work, had seen the way his fingers moved across the keyboard during their brief meetings. She'd spent 2 weeks mapping his patterns, and desperation had made her observant. She tried the first combination. Failed. Second attempt. Failed. The system would lock after 3 failures. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she entered the third option, a combination of dates she'd seen on the photograph in his desk drawer, the one he looked at when he thought no one was watching. The screen unlocked. Ella's breath caught. She was in. She navigated to the encrypted files, searching for anything marked Tony or Syndicate or extraction protocols. The search results populated slowly, each file name a potential revelation or dead end. But something else caught her attention, a folder labeled simply LG. She clicked it without thinking, and a collection of photographs filled the screen. A young girl, maybe 13 or 14, dark hair and bright eyes, holding a tabby kitten. The same girl older, laughing at a birthday party. The same girl in tactical training gear, her expression already hardening into something colder. Luna Gardner, Dominic's sister. Ella scrolled through the images, her mind racing. Then she saw the timestamps. The last photo was dated 8 years ago, the same year her family died, the same year Elias was extracted. She clicked on a document titled Operation Resurrection and began to read. It detailed a syndicate attack on the Gardner family, a failed negotiation that had left Luna Gardner missing and presumed dead. But Dominic hadn't accepted that conclusion. He'd spent years hunting for her, following leads, dismantling syndicate operations piece by piece. And then, buried in the operational notes, subject E.T., age 14, recovered from syndicate compound during raid, resembles LG in age and psychological profile, recruitment approved for tactical division. E.T. Elias Tony. Dominic had found a broken 14-year-old girl in the ruins of a syndicate operation and seen his sister's ghost. He hadn't saved Elias out of mercy. He'd saved her because she reminded him of what he'd lost. Ella's eyes burned. She closed the files and was about to shut down when she noticed something on Dominic's desk she'd missed during cleaning, a small frame turned face down. She lifted it, revealing the photograph beneath. 2 girls, maybe 5 years apart in age. The older one had dark hair and sharp features. The younger one had pale green eyes and a gap-toothed smile. They were laughing, holding ice cream cones, squinting against summer sunshine. Ella stared at her own face, 8 years younger and still innocent, standing next to the sister who'd promised to never leave her. The door opened behind her. She spun, the frame slipping from her hands and shattering on the floor. Dominic stood in the doorway, sweat still dampening his training clothes, his steel-gray eyes taking in the open laptop, the broken frame, Ella's guilt-stricken face. Behind him, Elias appeared, her hand already moving toward the weapon at her hip. "Step away from the desk," Dominic said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded violence. Ella's mind went blank with terror. She'd been caught. She'd crossed the final line. There would be no mercy this time. But then Dominic's gaze dropped to the shattered photograph on the floor, to the image of 2 girls frozen in a moment of happiness that felt like another lifetime. Something in his expression cracked, just for a second, just enough to show the pain beneath the armor. "Who taught you to pick locks?" he asked, his voice strange and distant. Ella's answer came out as a whisper. "My sister, before she disappeared." Elias's hand stopped halfway to her weapon. The silence in the study stretched like a blade held against skin. Dominic's eyes moved from Ella to the broken photograph on the floor, then to Elias, whose hand had frozen halfway to her weapon. For 5 seconds, no one moved. Then Dominic stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "Leave us," he said to Elias, his voice carrying a weight that wasn't quite a command, but wasn't a request either. Elias's jaw tightened. "Sir, she's breached." "I know what she's breached." His gaze remained locked on Ella. "And I know why. Leave us." Elias hesitated, the first crack in her perfect obedience, then turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing down the corridor with barely controlled precision. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a death sentence. Dominic moved to the laptop, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He scrolled through the open files, taking in everything Ella had accessed. Operation Resurrection, the Tony family files, the photographs of Luna. His face remained impassive, but something in his shoulders had gone rigid. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," he said finally. "Most people would have run. You stayed to find answers." He closed the laptop with careful precision. "Was it worth it?" Ella's voice came out hoarse. "You killed my parents. The syndicate killed your parents. I killed the people who gave the order." He turned to face her, and for the first time she saw exhaustion in his features. "Your father witnessed something he shouldn't have. They would have eliminated your entire family to keep him silent. I got there too late to save him and your mother, but I saved Elias." "You didn't save her. You made her into—" Ella's voice broke. "She doesn't even remember me." "She remembers." Dominic's words landed like stones. "She just can't afford to." Before Ella could respond, the laptop on the desk chimed, a soft electronic notification that made Dominic's expression darken. He opened it, and Ella watched his jaw clench as he read something on the screen. "What did you download?" His voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Nothing, I didn't—" But even as she said it, Ella remembered the USB drive she'd plugged in, the automatic backup protocol she'd triggered while navigating the files. Her stomach dropped. Dominic turned the screen toward her. A security alert blazed across it. Unauthorized data transfer detected. External device connected. Files copied. 47. Below it, a list of everything she'd accidentally downloaded. The Tony family operation files, the syndicate organizational charts, Dominic's personal correspondence, and buried in the list, a folder labeled Elias Tony, Psychological Profiles and Asset Development. "You just sent a notification to every security system in this compound," Dominic said, his voice carefully controlled, "including the ones that report directly to my board of directors. Within 5 minutes, 12 people will know that someone breached my personal server. Within 10, they'll demand I eliminate the security risk." Ella's hands started shaking. "I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't matter." He pulled the USB drive from the port and held it up to the light, examining it like it was evidence at a crime scene. "This contains enough information to dismantle half my operations. Names, accounts, safe houses. If this gets out, the syndicate will know everything about my organization's weaknesses." He dropped the drive on the desk between them. "So now we have a problem. I can't let you leave with this information. My people will demand proof that the breach has been contained. And Elias—" He paused, something almost like pain crossing his features. "Elias will be the one they task with confirming you're no longer a threat." The door opened before Ella could respond. Elias stepped back inside, her face a mask of professional detachment, but something in her eyes had changed. A flicker of recognition, or maybe just the memory of recognition, fighting against years of careful conditioning. "Sir," she said, her voice steady, "security protocols require immediate containment. I can handle it." Dominic studied her for a long moment. "And what does containment look like, Elias?" "Standard procedure for unauthorized access." Her hand moved to her weapon with practiced ease. "Quick, clean, no complications." Ella's breath caught. Her sister was offering to kill her, calmly, professionally, as if they were discussing inventory management instead of murder. But then Ella saw it, the microscopic tremor in Elias's trigger finger, the way her eyes kept sliding to the shattered photograph on the floor, the too careful neutrality of her expression, like she was holding something back by sheer force of will. "No," Dominic said quietly. Elias's head snapped toward him. "Sir?" "I said no." He moved between them, his body language protective in a way that caught both women off guard. "She's not a threat. She's a mirror." "A mirror of what?" Elias's voice had gone sharp, defensive. "Of you. 8 years ago. When I found you in that syndicate compound, covered in blood that wasn't yours, barely holding on to sanity." His words were surgical, cutting through Elias's armor with precision. "You were 16, broken, dangerous." And I gave you a choice. Become a weapon or become a casualty. You chose to survive. Something cracked in Elias's expression, just for a second, before the mask slammed back into place. Dominic turned back to Ella. The board will demand proof of containment, so we'll give it to them, but not the way they expect. He picked up the USB drive. You'll stay here, under guard, under observation, under Elias's direct supervision. If you try to run, if you try to contact anyone outside this compound, if you give me any reason to regret this decision, she dies, Elias finished, her voice hollow. I understand, sir. No. Dominic's gaze locked onto Elias with an intensity that made even her flinch. If she runs, you bring her back alive, because she's not an enemy, she's your sister. The words landed like a detonation. Elias went absolutely still. Her weapon hand dropped to her side. Her carefully constructed composure crumbled, revealing something raw and broken underneath. Her voice cracked. I don't have a sister. Yes, Dominic said gently, gesturing to the shattered photograph on the floor. You do. Elias's eyes followed his gesture. She stared at the image, at the two girls holding ice cream, laughing, their futures still unmurdered. And for the first time since Ella had arrived, she saw real emotion in her sister's face. Terror. They moved Ella to a different room, still in the annex, but on the third floor where the windows were smaller and the locks more sophisticated. 2 guards stationed outside, cameras in every corner, and Elias, sitting in a chair by the door like a statue carved from ice and unresolved trauma, watching her with eyes that flickered between recognition and denial. Shadow and Ghost had been allowed to come with her, a small mercy that felt more like psychological warfare. Dominic understood that taking them would break her. Leaving them meant she'd stay compliant, desperate to protect the last fragments of innocence she had left. 3 days passed in suffocating silence. Elias brought meals, changed shifts with the guards, conducted security sweeps of the room with mechanical efficiency. She never spoke, never made eye contact for longer than necessary. But Ella caught her staring at the kittens with an expression that looked almost like pain. On the 4th night, the silence broke. Why did you name them that? Elias's voice was rusty, like she'd forgotten how to use it for anything other than commands. Shadow and Ghost. Ella looked up from where she sat on the bed, her heart suddenly pounding. It was the first personal question Elias had asked, the first crack in the professional armor. After people I lost, Ella said carefully. A brother who died, a sister who disappeared. Elias's jaw tightened. That's morbid. So is forgetting they existed. The words landed like an accusation. Elias stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to check the perimeter cameras. You checked them 20 minutes ago. Then I'll check them again. But she didn't move toward the door. Instead, she stood there, rigid and trembling, like she was fighting a war inside her own body. Stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like you know me. Elias's voice cracked. Like I'm supposed to remember something I don't. Ella stood slowly, keeping her movements non-threatening. You used to braid my hair. Every morning before school, you'd complain that I never sat still, but you'd do it anyway. She took a step closer. You taught me how to pick locks using bobby pins because our babysitter used to lock the snack cabinet. You said everyone should know how to get to what they need. Elias's breathing had gone shallow. Stop. You had a scar on your left knee from when you fell off your bike trying to teach me how to ride. You said scars were just proof you'd survived something. Ella's voice broke. You promised you'd always protect me, that nothing bad would ever happen as long as you were there. I said stop. Elias spun toward her, and for the first time Ella saw tears in her sister's eyes. Angry. Desperate tears that she was fighting to contain. I don't remember any of that. I don't remember you. And even if I did, her voice dropped to something raw and broken. It wouldn't matter. That person doesn't exist anymore. She's still in there somewhere. She's dead. Elias said it with finality. She died the night the syndicate came. Everything before that is just noise. But her hand had moved unconsciously to her left knee, fingers tracing the scar through her tactical pants. Before Ella could respond, her door opened. Marcus stepped in, his expression grim. "The board's calling an emergency session. They want answers about the breach." His eyes flicked to Elias. "The architect wants you in the conference room. Now." Elias straightened immediately, the professional mask slamming back into place. "Understood." She moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at Ella with an expression that was almost apologetic. "Whatever happens in that meeting, don't try anything stupid." "What's going to happen?" "They're going to vote on whether you're an acceptable risk or a liability that needs to be eliminated." Elias's voice had gone flat again. "And I'm going to be asked whether I can be objective about executing that decision." She left before Ella could ask what her answer would be. The conference room was on the main house's top floor, a space Ella had never been allowed near. Through the security feed that Marcus had reluctantly shown her earlier, she could make out the shapes of 12 people seated around a long table. Dominic at the head, Elias standing behind him like a weapon held in reserve. Marcus had left her door unlocked. An oversight, or maybe a test. Ella didn't waste time questioning it. She grabbed the stolen phone from its hiding place behind the radiator, pulled up the photographs of the Tony family files, and started typing out a message to the one journalist whose encrypted contact she'd memorized from a shelter's community board. Evidence of murder, corruption, the architect's real identity, everything she'd been gathering for 2 years, finally ready to send. Her finger hovered over the button. In the other room, Shadow mewed, a soft, trusting sound. She thought about what would happen when she pressed send. The story would break. Dominic's empire would collapse. The syndicate would see their chance and move in for the kill. And Elias, the sister who'd been broken and rebuilt into a weapon, would be caught in the crossfire too. Ella had spent 2 years dreaming of this moment: justice, revenge, proof that she hadn't been crazy, that her parents' deaths weren't just a tragic accident, but she'd also spent those 2 years alone. And now, for the first time since that night, she had a chance, however broken, however complicated, to reclaim the one piece of her family that had survived. The door opened. Elias stepped in, her face ashen. "The vote was 8-4, in your favor." She sounded almost surprised. "You're staying? Under my supervision? Indefinitely." Ella's thumb moved away from the send button. "What changed their minds?" "Dominic." Elias's voice carried something that might have been respect or resentment, maybe both. "He told them you were more valuable alive than dead. That you had information about syndicate operations that could be extracted through time and patience." She paused. "He lied. You don't have that information. But he protected you anyway. Why would he do that?" Elias's eyes met hers, really met them, for the first time since she'd walked back into Ella's life. "Because he's trying to atone for every sister he couldn't save by saving you." Her voice dropped. "And because he knows that if I have to kill you, it will destroy what's left of whatever I used to be." She moved closer, and Ella saw the phone in her hand, saw the message still waiting unsent on the screen. "You were going to expose him." It wasn't a question. Ella's silence was answer enough. Elias reached out slowly, carefully, and took the phone from Ella's hand. For a moment, she stared at the evidence, at the proof that could bring down everything Dominic had built, everything she'd become. Then she deleted it. "You want revenge," Elias said quietly. "I understand that, but you don't understand what you'd be destroying." She looked up, and her eyes held a terrible wisdom. "The syndicate isn't just an enemy, it's a hydra. You cut off Dominic, and 10 worse things grow in his place, things that won't show mercy to homeless girls with kittens. So I'm supposed to just forget?" "No." Elias's voice turned sharp. "You're supposed to be smarter than I was. You're supposed to learn that sometimes survival means choosing the devil you know over the void that waits behind him." She handed the phone back, wiped clean. "And you're supposed to trust that maybe, the sister you lost is still trying to protect you, even if she can't remember why." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "I don't remember braiding your hair." I don't remember the bikes or the locks or the promises. Her hand traced the scar on her knee again. But sometimes I have dreams about a little girl with green eyes who used to follow me everywhere, who I'd die for without thinking twice. What happens in the dreams? Ella whispered. I save her. Elias's voice broke. Every single time I save her. But when I wake up, she's gone, and I'm still just a weapon that forgot how to be human. She walked out, locking the door behind her with a finality that felt like mourning. Ella sat in the darkness, holding Shadow and Ghost, staring at the blank phone screen where her revenge had been just seconds away. Outside, the snow began to fall again, endless, merciless, burying everything beneath layers of white silence. 2 weeks passed in a strange, suffocating equilibrium. Ella remained in the third-floor room, her world reduced to white walls and the rhythmic blinking of security cameras. Elias came 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, night, bringing meals and maintaining the pretense of professional detachment. But something had shifted. The silences between them had changed texture, becoming less hostile and more carefully navigated, like they were both walking through a minefield of memories neither could afford to trigger. On the 16th night, Dominic summoned them both. The study felt different this time. The fire was lit, casting shadows that danced across the mahogany walls like ghosts. Dominic stood by the window, his reflection fractured in the glass, watching the compound's perimeter lights cut geometric patterns through the darkness. The syndicate knows about the breach, he said without preamble. Not the details, but they know something compromised my security, and they're testing to see if it's created an opening. He turned, his steel-gray eyes moving between Ella and Elias. Which means we have a problem. Elias straightened. Sir? They've requested a meeting, neutral ground, tomorrow night. His jaw tightened. And they've specifically requested that I bring my head of security. They want to see if you're still loyal or if the breach has made you vulnerable. The word hung in the air like a threat. Ella's stomach dropped. They know about me? They know I'm sheltering someone. They don't know who or why. But they're wondering if it's a weakness they can exploit. Dominic's gaze settled on Elias. Which means this meeting is a test. Of you, of me, of whether we're still a unified front or if there are cracks they can leverage. Elias's expression remained neutral, but Ella saw the microscopic tension in her shoulders. What do you need me to do? I need you to prove your loyalty is absolute. Dominic moved away from the window, approaching them with the careful deliberation of someone delivering a death sentence. The syndicate will be watching for any sign of compromise, any hesitation, any indication that you've been distracted by personal matters. His eyes flicked to Ella. So I'm giving you a choice, Elias. You can come with me tomorrow, demonstrate that nothing has changed, and maintain the status quo. He paused. Or you can stay here, guard your sister, and confirm to every enemy I have that you've become a liability I can no longer trust. The silence that followed was absolute. Ella watched her sister's face, watched the war playing out behind those ice-cold eyes. Professional duty against dormant humanity. 8 years of conditioning against 16 nights of slowly cracking armor. I'll come with you, Elias said, her voice steady. Of course. Something in Ella's chest cracked. That's it? You're just going to... It's not a debate. Elias cut her off, but there was something in her tone, a tightness, a fragility, that suggested the decision wasn't as simple as she was making it sound. This is my job. It's what I do. It's what he made you do. Ella. Dominic's voice carried a warning. No. Ella stood, her fear transforming into anger. You're testing her. You're making her choose between being your weapon and being my sister, and you're calling it loyalty. I'm giving her agency, Dominic countered, his voice sharp. Something the syndicate never would have. She can choose to walk away from this life anytime she wants. The door isn't locked. Isn't it? Ella turned to Elias. When was the last time you made a choice that wasn't about survival or duty? When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Elias's composure finally cracked. You don't understand what you're asking. If I don't go tomorrow, if I show any sign of weakness, the syndicate will see it as an opening. They'll push, they'll test, and people will die. Her voice rose. Good people. Guards who have families. Staff who have nothing to do with this war. You think I want to be his weapon? You think I enjoy having your blood on my hands from lives I couldn't save? You don't have my blood on your hands. Not yet, Elias shouted, and the room went silent. Her breathing was ragged, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. But if the syndicate senses weakness, if they attack and breach this compound, I will. Because I won't be able to protect everyone. I'll have to choose who lives and who dies, and you will be one of those choices. She turned away, her hands shaking. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. You want to know the last time I made a choice that wasn't about survival? It was 8 years ago, when our parents were dying, and I had 3 seconds to decide whether to try to save them or grab you and run. Her voice broke. I chose you. I grabbed your hand and I ran, and the syndicate caught us anyway, and I had to watch you get taken while they dragged me in the opposite direction. So forgive me if I don't trust my own choices anymore. Ella felt like she'd been punched. What? Elias turned back, and her face was a map of old guilt and new pain. I remember, not everything. But I remember that night. I remember your hand slipping out of mine. I remember screaming your name while they sedated me. And I remember waking up 3 days later in a concrete room with Dominic standing over me, offering me a choice. Become strong enough that no one could ever take you from me again, or stay weak and watch everyone I loved die. She looked at Dominic, and something in her expression was almost grateful, which was somehow more devastating than anger would have been. He didn't make me into a weapon. I asked him to, because I couldn't survive being powerless again. Dominic's face was unreadable, but Ella saw the tightness around his eyes, the look of a man watching his carefully constructed redemption story reveal all its ugly complications. Tomorrow's meeting, he said quietly, is voluntary, Elias. I won't order you to come, but I need to know. Can you do this? Can you stand next to me in a room full of people who want us dead and show them nothing but strength? Elias straightened, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The professional mask reassembled itself piece by piece, but now Ella could see the effort it took, could see her sister actively choosing to become the weapon rather than simply being one. Yes, sir, I can. Then we leave at 8. Dominic moved toward the door, then paused. Ella will remain here under Marcus's supervision. If anything happens to us, he has instructions to get her out safely. Where would I go? Ella asked, her voice hollow. Wherever you want. Dominic's answer was matter of fact. You'll have resources, documentation, a new identity if you need it. You'll be free. The word felt like a lie. After Dominic left, Elias lingered by the door. She stared at Ella for a long moment, and something in her expression was painfully young, a glimpse of the sister who used to braid hair and pick locks and promise protection. I need you to understand something, Elias said quietly. When I go into that meeting tomorrow, I'm doing it to protect you. Not Dominic. Not his empire. You. She took a shaky breath. Because if the syndicate thinks he's weak, they'll come here. And the only thing standing between them and you is me being strong enough, scary enough, loyal enough that they don't dare. What if something happens to you? Then Marcus gets you out and you run. You take those cats and you disappear and you never look back. Elias's voice cracked. And you live the life I couldn't give us 8 years ago. She pulled something from her pocket, a small photograph, creased and faded. The same image from the shattered frame. 2 girls, ice cream, summer sunshine. She pressed it into Ella's hand. I've been carrying this for 6 years, since the day I found it in Dominic's desk and realized the girl in the picture might still be alive. Her fingers lingered over Ella's. I didn't know it was you until you showed up at the gate. But some part of me has been waiting for you this whole time. She pulled away before Ella could respond, her mask fully restored. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. She left, and the lock engaged with a soft click that sounded like goodbye. Ella sat alone, holding the photograph in shadow and ghost, watching through the window as snow continued its endless fall. In 12 hours, her sister would walk into a room full of people who wanted her dead and prove she was still the perfect weapon. And Ella would wait here, powerless, just like she'd been 8 years ago. The photograph trembled in her hands. Two girls who didn't know yet that the world would tear them apart, who thought promises meant something, who believed love was stronger than violence. Ella pressed the image against her chest and let herself cry for the first time since the night her parents died. Because she finally understood what Elias had been trying to tell her. Sometimes protecting someone meant becoming the monster that frightened away the worst monsters. Sometimes love looked like choosing to be a weapon so the person you loved could stay soft. And sometimes the only way to save your sister was to let her walk into the fire alone. Thank you for staying with me till the very end of this story. Every view, every comment, every moment you spend here keeps these stories alive. If you felt this one, make sure to subscribe and let me know you watched to the end.